Good morning to those of you in Europe and perhaps some early morning risers in the United States. Good afternoon to our panelists in China. Um, uh, this webinar on Chinese market access for health tech companies is one of a series of webinars that we've done on market access. The U.S. market access webinars are available online. I'm Bob Mullen, and our organizers today are Global Tech Advocates, HealthTech, and China Tech Advocates, HealthTech. Skip Riddle and I lead Global Tech Advocates. Tim Johns, who has organized this webinar, leads the China Tech Advocates, HealthTech. So who are we? Global Tech Advocates is a volunteer organization which is focused on helping startups and the tech sector generally. We started about 10 years ago in London. We now have chapters across the globe. Membership is free, and you're very welcome to join. GTA Health Tech is effectively the health tech working group of Global Tech Advocates. We're particularly focused on helping health tech startups, and especially with cross-border issues given our international network. So I think that's enough on us. Let's get on with the webinar. Tim, over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that, Bob. My name's Tim. I'm joining you today from Shanghai. I've been here for 10 years around, and over the last decade, we've seen a lot of changes all across China and also within healthcare and life sciences as well. Now, China could be regarded as one of the fastest countries in the world to get a new medical product approved because the approval system has been revamped and streamlined to such an extent, and we may hear Hamish refer to that later in one of our panels. But regardless of these developments, China is still a complex market and not for the faint of heart. Several common challenges have been consistently reported over the years, and some of these cases have improved, but some also may be perceived issues rather than actual barriers. Having said that, foreign companies usually will want to educate themselves on how to adequately protect their IP, how to legally access and comply with China data laws, which is a big deal, and also how to commercialize and identify a paying customer, which may not be a copy and paste from other regions. So during this webinar, we will introduce some experts who will help us to understand some of these opportunities and challenges. To begin with, we'll have a couple of speakers who will have around 10 minutes to share with us. The first will be Frank Zhou from a law firm called Junhe, and the second speaker will be a gentleman called Mr. Tang, who's head of the Roche accelerator here in Shanghai. Later, we'll have two panels. The first will be for foreign companies who will share what they've been doing in China. And then the final panel will be more for industry experts to share some of their insights on what's happening more broadly across China. So with that, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Mr. Frank Zhou, who's partner at Junhe, a law firm in Shanghai, leads the life science practice here. Junhe is a large law firm, has 14 offices around the world. And when I first met Frank, I was quickly impressed by two things. First, he has a deep understanding of the life science industry here in China. And also, he is quite familiar with Chinese medical companies that are looking to broaden their portfolio and in-license technology to China. So for that reason, I thought he was quite relevant to this webinar. So very lucky to have him here to share with us today. So with that, I'll pass over directly to Frank. Over to you, Frank.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning. My name is Frank Zhou, as introduced by Tim. I co-chair the firm's life science practice. My practice area is mainly private equity transactions, IPOs, business development transactions, but mainly on the life sciences industry. I've been with this firm for 20 years. Just a few words about Junke. Junke is one of the biggest law firms in China. We have about 300 partners and about 700 lawyers, so about 1,000 fee earners. Mainly in China, we have 11 offices in China. We are full service, and we basically advise on the full life cycle of medtech companies and other companies with business in China. So with that, I will start with my my presentation. Just give me a minute to share my screen. So today I'm going to use about 10 minutes to give you a brief introduction of China market access for tech and devices companies. For any foreign companies to enter into China, you need to consider the regulatory requirements. So here is a recap of the general requirements. So China adopts the market authorization system for actually both for pharmaceuticals and for medical devices. But here I mainly introduce for devices and medtech companies. So market authorization basically means that you can have product registration separate from manufacturing. Previously, that's not possible in China. It has to be combined. After the separation of M&H and manufacturing, actually there are a lot of medtech, biotech companies developing rapidly in China. So basically, the medtech companies, they focus on development, but they contract out manufacturing to third-party CMOs. Medical software, if they serve medical purposes and if they're standalone, they are also regarded as medical devices and subject to product registration or filing requirements in China. And for manufacturing, all the manufacturers of medical devices needs to have appropriate manufacturing license. And I have to point out that even though under Chinese law, MH, the product registration and the manufacturing can separate, but there's no not permitted for cross-border CMO, which means that if, for example, if a foreign company register its product in China for sale and commercialization, then the FDA authority in China, we call it NMPA. NMPA will assume that the product is produced or manufactured outside China. So you can't register your product by a foreign company, but at the same time use a Chinese manufacturer to produce the products. So only in, for example, if the product is registered in China, then you can use a Chinese manufacturer to produce such products. So that's a minor, a slight point, but sometimes it will affect your structuring of your business model in China. But this is going to, there's a little change recently that cross-border CMO is allowed in Greater Bay Area, which basically refer to a few cities in Guangdong province. So this is a evolving regulatory development. And for commercialization, I think any company want to do business in China needs to consider the tender and bidding process, the volume-based procurement initiated by the medical insurance authorities in China, and also the national reimbursed drug list. This list is called the drug list, but it also includes certain medical devices. Only if you are included in this list can the product be reimbursed by the Chinese medical insurance scheme. So any products, if you want to commercialize in China, you need to consider the purchaser and how you are able to benefit from the NRDL and the VBP procurement scheme. One point I need to point out is that currently, I think the procurement process, I mean, when I say procurement, it's usually procurement by hospitals. The majority of the hospitals in China are public hospitals. So the procurement by the hospitals are regarded as public procurement, and usually they prefer locally manufactured products. If it's imported products, then it could lose a competitive edge in the Chinese market. And that's why I think we have queries from time to time how to localize the production of like foreign medical products in China. So I will introduce a little bit going forward. So this is the customary registration pathway for medical devices. So first of all, you need to consider which class your medical device falls in. For class 1, which has the maybe the lowest safety requirements, then it only requires a filing, and the process usually takes a couple of weeks to a couple of months, but not very long. But for class 2 and class 3, sometimes the clinical evaluation could be exempted, but sometimes you need to undergo a clinical evaluation or even clinical trial process. And the timeline could last anytime between 18 months to 36 months for the registration itself. So it could be a pretty long process if you want to access the Chinese market. And there is one accelerated pathway if the devices have been registered in China, but it's imported device. If you want to localize the product, basically it's manufactured outside China, but if you want to manufacture it in China, then there will be an accelerated pathway. We call it the 104 pathway. So the foreign image holder can set up a subsidiary in China, and the subsidiary in China can produce the products in China. If this condition is met, then all the dossiers, when you register the product as imported devices, can be recognized by the NMPA authority in China. So that will accelerate the registration process. We recently conducted the first registration of class 3 devices in Shanghai. I think the whole process took only 6 months. As I mentioned, if you follow the traditional pathway, it could take 18 to 36 months. So it's a drastic shortening of the registration timeline. So this is for localization of the devices. And as to the market access models, I think China is no different. I think what's the models that are customary internationally could also apply in China. But here are a few models. One is basically you register your product as a foreign company, right? And then you use a local distributor to distribute your products in China. I think that's a very customary approach. I think the key issue, I mean, there are various issues under this model, but one of the issues that you need to consider is how to early terminate the agreement, because the partner may not serve your purpose going forward, and you want an opportunity to exit. So in the distribution sales agreement, I think you need to have early termination clauses so that you can be able to divorce if the cooperation is not that successful. So that's the first model. And this model is also very common. That's a licensing model. So the difference from the first model is that the foreign company is not the market authorization holder for its products in China. On the contrary, the Chinese local partners will be the MH and be responsible for, I think in particular, if the product is just a prototype, it has not been commercialized anywhere, then the local partners could be responsible for R&D and also for regulatory registration and also for commercialization of the product. And the local partner can produce the products by themselves or subcontract to a CMO. I think the key issue here is that I mean, if you use this model, you actually license the product to this to the partner, and the partner will own the product registration. So it's a bit difficult for the foreign company to take it back if the cooperation went awry. So I think that's the key issue for the licensing model. And the third model, I think, is more capital intensive. That is, you set up your own operation, a WOFE, wholly foreign owned enterprise in China, and the WOFE will be the marketing authorization holder of the products. Of course, you have a greater control over the process. And as I mentioned, under the 104 pathway, actually, you can have accelerated process to register your product in China. But you can also register under the regular pathway. I think the upside of doing this, even though it takes longer time, the upside is that you can subcontract to a CMO rather than having to do the production by yourself. I think this model is good, but it's just that you need more capital investment into this model. Lastly, you can partner with Chinese partners. You can work with venture capitals. You can work with industrial partners. To set up a joint venture. And the key issue here is, I think, mainly about corporate governance. So what decisions are made by you and what decisions are made by the partners? Usually it will be decided by the board. So there's a lot of issues to be considered if you're going to set up this structure. So these are the customary models. I have some other considerations. Maybe I just very briefly mention that to you. One is regarding the protection of IP. It's an eternal topic. I think in China we have Mo and Dao. I mean, Mo means the devil, and Dao means the way. I mean, there's always a fight between Mo and Dao, and sometimes Mo prevails, sometimes Dao prevails. I think IP is the same thing. It's always defense and attack. And I think a successful IP strategy in China, it will be multifaceted. I mean, you have to consider it from business perspective. You have to register your product in China, your IP in China. You have to have very solid contractual protections, and you have to enforce all these IP measures, strategies in China in order to protect your IP. I think that's the point I want to make. For the partners that you choose, my recommendation is that thorough due diligence. You can send questionnaires to the partners, or you can have back-to-back due diligence, all are very common in China. Some Chinese partners are very sophisticated, have a lot of international exposure. So it could be even better than multinational company partners in China. So it really depends on what kind of partners you're going to choose. And if you choose state-owned companies as your partner, I think the issue that we need to consider is state-owned companies, they have a very opaque and very slow internal process. Even though they are very powerful, they have a lot of resources, but their decision-making could be very slow and very bureaucratic. So be careful if you partner with a state-owned company. And a lot of my clients actually ask regarding the funds. I mean, whether the dividends or other funds are easily able to be transferred out of China. my advice is always that dividends is regarded as current account transactions under the Chinese regulations. So there's no barriers to distribute dividends, just like there's little or no barriers to pay pay prices for import and export commodities. I mean, it's similar, but of course, if the dividend amount is huge, then the transaction bank may not have sufficient funds to pay the dividends. It may negotiate with you to pay the dividends in the installments, but usually there's no barriers. But if you want to do capital account transactions, then it could take longer time. Yes.
Thanks,
I think
Frank.
that's all.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks very much, Frank. Great to see some of those market access models and great insights on the devil and the way, as well as many other things there. So for startups and for scale-ups who may not be ready to go it alone and may need a partner or perhaps a whole ecosystem of partners, we're going to move on now to the next speaker, Cho-Sung Tang. One of the places that you might be able to get support could be a pharmaceutical accelerator. There are many tech parks and many accelerators in China. Shanghai has a large one called Zhangjiang Tech Park. And our next speaker, Cho-Sung Tang, is head of the Roche Accelerator here in Zhangjiang, Shanghai. And he's going to help share what kind of innovative technology he's seeing and what demand there may be in the near future. So over to Mr. Tang. Thanks.
Very good. I hope you can hear me well. And thanks, Bob and Tim, for having me. I'm Cho-Sung, the head of Accelerator, and I would love to give an introduction about the pharmaceutical business and how Roche is seeing the trend and also the next wave innovation that can actually transform our drug discovery and development, particularly in through data, AI, and machine learning. And then I'm actually going to showcase a few companies that Roche has collaborated with worldwide as well as in China to give a sense about what type of companies we are willing to support and collaborate with. So I will try to be very brief. Let me start with the slide. Okay, so first of all, I think the pharmaceutical business is very special, right? If you think about all the way from the early therapeutic target discovery to discovering and making a molecule, making a drug, all the way to testing the efficacy and the safety of these molecules in the preclinical settings, from in vitro models to animals, and then all the way to clinical trials in phase 1 to phase 3. I think the amount of investment, the timeline, are humongous, and typically people are talking about in the scale of billions and spanning across decades, and only perhaps 1 out of 100 molecules could make it to the market. And then once you're in the market, you could only enjoy a patent life for example, for a few years, typically less than 10 years, and then the drug price got reduced by 90%, and then you're basically out of business, and then you have to reinvent everything again, trying to find new targets, new molecules, or new indications, and then you start all over again. So people might ask you, okay, why the hell is the pharmaceutical business like this, and why there are so many multinational companies working on this? Because if you look at this map, you may realize that you may think this is a little bit ridiculous. But if you think about this one little red dot who actually made it all the way through the funnel to the final market delivered to the patients, this means life to hundreds or millions of patients who are going to be saved or changed by this small little pill or a small little antibody. And that's why this means everything to us. That's why Roche, together with any other multinational pharmaceutical business companies, we are in this business, and we would love to innovate and deliver the best medical solutions to patients worldwide. Now, as you can imagine, this is a very challenging issue and very challenging business, because you are dealing with the most complex organizations or most complex structures in the world, right? We are talking about in a scale of in the power of tens or high teens of different cell types, different genes, proteins, different type of diseases, and patients very heterogeneous, and there are different type of diseases, mutations, and you can come up with all kinds of antibody sequences or molecular structures to test and to work to see if this could make to the patients. That sounds mission impossible. And over the past of say centuries, there are only, I think, 1 or 200 drugs that have been approved by FDA. That give you a sense about how difficult and challenging it is. Now, because I think the audience of today's webinar is mostly on the tech and I guess many data and digital companies, I want to talk about how digitization is transforming the entire healthcare value chain right now. So if you look at this from all the way from early R&D to clinical to pricing, market access, towards commercialization, actually digitization is transforming and impacting the entire value chain in all possible ways. So you can think about things like we can find new targets, we can accelerate our clinical trials, find we can find the most suitable patients on the trials, and we can better serve our patients' needs, as well as we can, developing tools and application to support our physicians and carers on their decision making, as well as all the logistics and the support. I'm going only to talk about the R&D piece because this is where Roche is primarily interested and my accelerator is primarily focused on. So we could look at 4 levers: human biology, massive scale data, AI and machine learning tools and algorithms, as well as new modalities. So human biology is basically seeing that, okay, if we could use, organoids and human-derived models to better predict and model the performance of a certain drug in human setting. High resolution and massive scale, we want to get as much data as we can so that at a lower cost, so that we can use these data to derive insights. We want to develop new modalities, basically new type of molecules that could target previously undruggable targets in using classical therapeutic approaches. And last but not least, we see large language models, machine learning algorithms. These are transforming the way we do drug discovery and development. Especially, I want to talk about one thing, which is a concept we call lab in the loop. This is essentially the Roche way of looking at how we could combine all these things in a loop and do all the iterations with experimental data and in combination with algorithms and models that are trained from this experimental data, and then use this to help us predict or identify novel targets, design or potentially predict the performance of these molecules in their efficacy and the safety issues, then to help us, validate or devalidate our hypothesis of certain approaches. Then we do this again and again until essentially we could integrate our experimental data and large language models, so that we could massively accelerate our speed, reduce our cost and cycle time, so that we could actually deliver drugs to the patients at a much higher speed and lower cost. So around the world, Roche has formed alliances with many leading health tech companies. I could name a few here. as you can see, these 8 companies, they are ex-China companies. Some of these are very big companies like NVIDIA, where we leverage their GPU resources. There are also smaller scale biotech companies or even startup companies where we try to work with them in order to get a certain questions addressed to help us identify novel targets or novel modalities. I want to also mention 3 Chinese companies that we have worked with so far, and all of these 3 companies are AI-based, and they are the portfolio of Roche Accelerator. One is Metis. They are working on small molecule formulation. So we are actually leveraging their platform and technology to do AI and high throughput screening based formulation and validation for some of the very challenging formulations. Helixon is working on antibody design, so they have some of the most advanced protein modeling and design platforms. So we are trying to use their platform to help to do de novo antibody design and optimization. And last but not least, I think we also have Syneron, which is working on peptide. It is a peptide therapeutics combined with chemistry, screening platforms, and AI capabilities. We hope that they could develop something as protein-protein interaction disruptors. So I hope these give you a slightly high-level overview about the Roche way of looking at AI and machine learning in transforming drug discovery development, and some of the companies we have worked with, and how we work them both in China and around the world. With that, I will hand over to Tom. Thanks.
Thanks, Cho-sung. Great to see what Roche is doing. And I'm sure you'd welcome visitors who were visiting Shanghai to come and have a look at your accelerator. And it would be quite eye-opening to see what's happening in Zhangjiang generally. So we're going to change gears now and go into the first panel discussion. We'll ask a question to each of the panelists directly, and then either Bob or Skip from GTA HealthTech in the UK will finish off with a question to all of the panelists. So the panelists will be in this panel. This is for foreign companies who are already active or engaged in China in some way. The first panelist is Alex, CEO, founder of In Silico Medicine, which is a leading clinical stage biotech company developing next generation generative AI and robotics platforms for drug discovery. We'll also have Stephen Knowles, Managing Director of IDC, that specializes in developing drug delivery devices, including injection systems, inhalers, nasal devices, and other oral delivery devices. And also we'll have Nathan McNally, who's the co-founder of P4 Precision Medicine Accelerator. P4 is actually also exploring setting up an innovation center in China, initially in Beijing, to support and bridge their activity between the UK and China. So I think Alex is most pressed for time, so we'll start here. I think he has another meeting to go to pretty soon. So Alex, if it's okay, we'll ask you directly. I know you're very active all over the world in AI drug discovery and anti-aging topics, but you've also been connected and working in China for many years. Some might say that it's harder actually to commercialize and protect software IP, and that China prefers hardware. Would you agree with that? And what opportunities have you seen for foreign digital health companies like In Silico? Do you think other companies could follow in your footsteps?
So sure. Well, first of all, on the IP protection, we so far have not encountered any problems in terms of IP. We actually encountered those kind of problems in many other areas around the world, where people like to use our algorithms without telling us. It's also apparent in the academic literature. So, for example, in China, when people develop an algorithm based on our prior art, they usually cite the paper. In many other areas, people are not as meticulous when it comes to citing prior art. We've seen a couple examples where people pretty much copied the entire website of In Silico and tried to copy the tools, but usually those tools just do not work. So in our industry, people like to prefer to have validated algorithms, because you don't make you don't save money on software. You save money on having to synthesize less molecules or having less failures, the need to perform less experiments, and have higher precision, higher probability of success. It's a high stakes game. So people do not try to save money on pirated software. One of the reasons why we decided to come to China and utilize the power of China, and I actually apologize for background noise because I am in China at a conference in Beijing, and I'm presenting in the very near future. So one of the main reasons why we came here is because of the infrastructure. So the infrastructure that China put in place for the synthesis, chemical synthesis, validation, animal experiments, and everything that leads to the clinical development. So all the preclinical work can be done much faster, much more efficiently, not necessarily cheaper, but the probability of success is usually higher. So we have not seen this kind of level of quality and integration anywhere else in the world. You have hundreds of thousands of synthetic chemists in just one place. Actually, Roche presented just before me, and they know, the Zhanjiang area, the area in Shanghai and Pudong, where most of the biotechnology is centralized, is extremely rich with talent that is, absent in many other regions around the world. And you can basically, on 1 square kilometer, you can hire 5 companies that will do synthesis and test and very rapidly validate your hypotheses that are coming from AI in animal models. So the level of infrastructure is just extraordinary. And nowadays, there are talks about the disconnect from China and limitations for using China infrastructure. I hope it doesn't happen because it will impede companies like ours dramatically. Because to tap into this same level of infrastructure, that infrastructure needs to be built somewhere else first, right? And that's why Apple still manufactures, I guess, MacBooks in China, but it also sells MacBooks in China as well. So we are not selling much in China, but we are doing a lot of kind of chemical manufacturing and testing in China, and that's probably the best place in the world to do that. And I hope that to have effective medicines for patients around the world, we need to ensure that there is peace, both peace in its core definition of the word, but also economic peace and geopolitical peace. So we need to ensure that people do get to collaborate, at least in biomedical sciences. And having access to the China infrastructure and the talent is extremely important in order to develop drugs and put them into human clinical trials quickly and also cheaply. So that's one of the reasons why we're in China. And it's also, you need to be future safe. It's a population of 1.4 billion people. In a minor regulatory reform here that would allow for the innovative drugs to be properly reimbursed would dramatically increase the chances that you can recover your costs for discovery of novel therapeutics for taking this risk. And it's very important to be in this region and be prepared for an explosion in biotechnology research triggered by the possible regulatory change. So I think it's extremely important to be in China for many reasons, and any global company should have presence here.
Thanks very much, Alex. I know you're pressed for time, so you can feel free to log off if you need to, but I really appreciate your insights there. Good to hear about the research opportunities in China, not just the commercial opportunities which people often talk about. And if anybody wants more information, they can find that you're well published online, and you've written several very in-depth LinkedIn articles about the different places that you've landed and ways you've interacted with China. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to present. And again, I think it's $500 billion to $1 trillion is what China spent on infrastructure locally, and replicating that somewhere else would be difficult. But I think that in the case that the US would like to have those capabilities, it actually has a great chance to start investing in infrastructure. I don't think decoupling is the answer.
Thanks very much, Alex. So we just talked about software there. Moving on to Stephen now to talk a little bit about devices. Some people have said that dealing with medical devices versus software can be a little easier generally to commercialize in China. You already have a China team based in Shanghai, I think, and you've helped several big pharma to design bespoke drug delivery devices. How are you able to communicate your expertise as a foreign company versus local companies which are growing in capability all the time?
Well, I mean, I guess we're focused on all sorts of medical devices, so drug delivery devices, as you said, but also surgical equipment, robotics, home use products, all sorts of things. So it's all those devices are pretty complicated, complex devices. They have a lot of regulations, and so there's not many companies in China, even right up to now, that actually have the capability of navigating that whole process. Most of the capability for doing that tends to be in-house within the large companies, and the consultancies tend to be focused on the front-end design, but not necessarily the full end-to-end delivery. So I think we're reasonably unique. Not aware of any other consultancies that have ISO 13485, which is the medical quality standard that allows you to develop medical devices, and that is, that's, I guess, our big USP in China. In terms of whether it's easier to commercialize medical devices in China, I would say it's all very possible. What's important is that you kind of think about the market entry strategy and understand it. So first of all, you need to understand how your product fits into the market, and then you need to make sure that your product matches the local needs, and then the whole regulatory process kicks in. So in terms of where your product would fit into the market for medical devices, Frank illustrated earlier in his speech about the government volume-based procurement. So if you're selling to public hospitals, if your device is a product which is categorized as a fairly sort of standard kind of product that a hospital is going to need, then there's probably a value-based procurement kind of tender. There'll be a price point at which the government wants to pay, and so that has a lot of implications in terms of what you can actually sell the product for. So that ends up being low innovation, commodity items, huge volume, and local manufacturers preferred. So that, in many cases, if you've got a very innovative product or you've got a premium product, that can make it very difficult to get it into the public health system and the public hospital system. The private health system is much smaller, but has more innovative products. It has potentially new procedures, which aren't the sort of procedures that happen in the hospitals nationwide. So patent protection obviously is important across whatever you're doing, but more important devices are used, but obviously you'll need to find a local distributor. So understanding that switch between those. And then the third category is consumer health. So home use, self-administered products, diagnostics, and there the opportunity for sort of innovation is there. It's more of a marketing-driven kind of market, less on the technology, more on the where do you fit in the market. So then potentially the fact that it's a foreign made or foreign designed product can be a unique selling point and a point of trust for local consumers who want to have that. Obviously, IP is still a big advantage to stop that kind of, because whatever you start selling successful, then there'll be people wanting to jump on the coattails of it. And thinking about how that all fits together and what your distribution will be. So that's the kind of market. Then when you come to looking at adjusting your products, obviously cost is always a big factor. So expensive single-use products on a procedure basis tend not to be very popular, and we've done a lot of projects where we've turned single-use devices into reusable devices that can be cleaned and sterilized and so on. The clinical practice is different, so you need to get out and into the hospitals and see the medical professionals to actually understand how they work. But I think it's a good market for entry. So we've done consumer-based products where we've launched them and developed them in China, and then the client has actually then taken them worldwide a year or two later. So it's I think that the key thing is it's a big market, it's an exciting market, but it is quite different, and you have to investigate it and understand the challenges.
Thanks very much, Stephen. Very interesting insights there. Nathan, your perspective is possibly a little broader in that you're not technology specific, but possibly earlier stage technology. You've been out to Beijing in the last few months, and you're coming again. What sort of trends are you seeing, and what do you think could fit into the China market as it is?
Yeah, so the reason why we started really kind of proactively looking at the China and Asian market is we've been going 5 years. We have companies now, Series B, Series C, where they've entered probably the US, have some traction in Europe, and now looking at Asia and China. So having a physical team in Beijing will support that effort. And the reason why we've done it is because some of our companies have entered China in varying success. And as Stephen mentioned, there's barriers, there's intricacies to be aware of. Although we have some later stage companies, we have very novel, innovative solutions as well. So that means working with local partners, such as academia, such as the hospitals, to validate these technologies firstly. And with the public sector and the nationwide procurement, if you have a solution that shows the value of the introduction, it's a huge market. The reason why we've landed in Beijing is China very much mirrors essentially the UK, where like London has a very big government pool, Beijing also has that big political pool as well. So we're starting there. There's some very good hospitals and universities with Peking and Beijing University and some child health hospitals that we're focusing on as well. And this allows for that, those regulation studies, those clinical studies to really validate. And then there's areas such as Shanghai that's been touched upon that's really strong in pharmaceutical, Shenzhen for manufacturing, and the wider area. So there are certain areas like UK where the north is very manufacturing intensive. There's areas where you've got to realize where there's certain talent pools, certain barriers, certain local subsidies, and work with the whole infrastructure of the country as well.
Thanks, Nathan. Bob, do you have a question for the two panelists?
Yeah, look, when I think about China and the experience I've had in terms of trying to help medtech companies that are going into China, a big question has been how to vet partners. It seems likely, particularly for the kinds of companies that are on this program today, that they're not likely to have a lot of resource and therefore are likely to be dependent upon Chinese partners for development. And Frank has already addressed some of the issues associated with that. But a big problem that I've seen is really how you determine both the integrity of the partner that you're dealing with and also perhaps the political risk of that partner may face. And I wonder if Stephen or Nathan, if either of you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I guess we've had a lot of experience of working with Chinese companies as customers, so they're our clients effectively, and so we've been in China since 2011 with a physical presence and working since 2008, and so we've built up some quite strong relationships with those companies and quite a strong network. So I think from we've found companies that we've that have been our customers have also quite often been good partners for manufacturing and subcontracting for some of our other clients who are coming to China, and those sort of relationships have been built over time. In terms of distribution and selling, again, that's not our sort of our main sort of business activity is not necessarily connecting companies with distributors, but we've got links. I think I'd echo some of the comments earlier about public sector. We've got links in with some public sector companies, and there's lots of talking and not much action sometimes. But yeah, we've got some strong relationships in certain areas, and we like to try and leverage those as much as we can, really, because that's China is a market that's built on personal relationships and understanding and that kind of trust that doesn't just sort of arrive with a meeting and a contract. It takes time to develop.
Yeah, I would echo that. It takes time to enter any market. I think building up that relationship in China is probably unique as well, and it takes probably a bit longer than some commercially minded markets where you can just go, we want this delivered, here's a contract and money. That's what we're doing, and hopefully our mission is to break down those barriers for precision medicine health tech to scale. So us doing that upfront work of building partners, building an ecosystem, building trusted community like us on this call today, and having the conversation of being able to go to someone and go, oh, we've got this device, do you know someone that's able to manufacture this or distribute this, or a partner? We're building up our own partners as well, so we'll be able to have that trusted ecosystem. And our initiative initially will be so we're opening up an innovation center in Beijing, about 20,000 square feet co-work space, life science space, that we're able to land the companies, have a safe place for them to land with all the partners initially there for them.
Thank you very much, Nathan. I'm somewhat conscious of time, Tim, and we should perhaps move on to our second panel.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean, it was good to hear from individual companies there in Silico, IDC, and P4. I think it can also be good moving on to the next panel to hear from experts that are looking at things from a slightly broader perspective, if you like, as people who are dealing with many companies and regulatory bodies, who are experts in certain functions along the market access pathway. So we're going to bring Frank back. Also Hamish, who's CEO of a regulatory and compliance consultancy, which was founded in China and Munich in Beijing in 2002. It's a family-owned company providing regulatory compliance services for China and Hong Kong, including product registration, in-China testing, clinical studies, and many other things, which I won't mention now. And Alicia, I don't know if Alicia is on the call. Oh, she is. Great. Alicia is the lead for APAC Med the lead for China that is based in Beijing. And Alicia leads cross-functional work, including government affairs, regulatory affairs, digital health policy shaping and cooperation of the medtech industry in the China market, and provides opportunities for China's medtech companies also to seek cooperation in APAC. So if it's okay, Hamish, I'm going to go directly to you when we're looking at approvals and regulations, and we're thinking about how to get reliable information on regulations in China. How politicized is that process, or versus how merit-based is it? And also, are local clinical trials likely to be required, or will foreign trial results be respected? That's probably a handful, but yeah, I know you can handle it.
Yeah, thank you, Timothy, and thank you for having me to speak here with Frank and Alicia as well. Yeah, I mean, taking the first point you mentioned, there are a few in there about reliable information. There is regulations published frequently, and we're talking medical device specifically here on the NMPA, the regulatory authority website. That is, of course, primarily in Chinese, although they have an English version of the website, which has much more limited information. There is also quite substantial English translation of regular newsletters or notifications from various other independent bodies. So I think access to regulatory information is not something I'd say is so limited. It is there. Perhaps from an international company trying to find it in English language, it can be more difficult. But the information is available. Yeah, I think that's the first point to say. Sometimes it can be difficult because there are informations issued by different bodies, and circulating that into one can be difficult because there can be provincial or different regulatory bodies which do change over time as well. I think the next point was about politicized treatment of imported products. Actually, imported and domestic products do need to formally go through the same requirements in terms of product registration of medical device, and they are treated similarly. There are some slight differences because Class 2, for example, and Frank talked about it before, go to the provincial regulatory authority. That leads to some practical differences and cost differentials because the application fee is different in different provinces. But in formal matters, the requirements are the same for imported versus domestic products. Yeah, and I think the final question was about clinical trials. Frank clearly, talked about this pathway and the needs for differing clinical data required to substantiate your product approval. In fact, Class 2 and 3 products that is the higher risk products, are mostly by default require really a China trial, unless they are exempt, or unless they have a predicate device, an already registered China device, or unless they have clinical trial data conducted elsewhere in the world. So yes, certainly NMPA will accept your clinical trials conducted in the US, in Europe, in the UK. There are some provisos. There needs to be some sufficient case numbers and all the rest. But in general terms, such international data is acceptable. And so my general message is that imported product registration is certainly feasible. We do it every day for our customers. And so, yes, there are timelines, but the US has a long timeline too. And it is, and we strongly encourage companies to consider the product registration.
Thanks very much, Hamish. Going to you next, Alicia. You're in a position where you're helping Chinese medtech companies go out to different parts of APAC, and also seeing foreign medtech companies in China. What different strategies are you seeing employed by foreign health tech, medtech companies in China that's working these days? Alicia, can you hear me? You're on mute.
Sorry, Tim, because I didn't catch the first part of the question. So
Yeah,
I
I
think I
was just
lost my
asking.
Wi-Fi.
Okay, if you can hear me now, I was just asking what strategies you're seeing employed by foreign med tech or health tech companies in China that are working these days.
Yeah, thanks for the question. As a introduction, APEC Med, the Asia Pacific Medical Technology Association, is a regional medtech association based in Singapore, and I'm leading the China office of it based in Beijing. And our members range from the top 20, 30 global medtech companies to SMEs and startups in this region, including the China local based members. So we've seen over these years that China has been launching a number of payment reforms tools, starting from VBP, volume-based procurement, to DRG. But we do see that the government is looking at value-based market access still at an early stage, but it has been doing it this way. So that is why some of our members based in China, big or small, are starting to look at how to present real world evidence to present their hard evidence in economic to present their economic outcome in collaboration with local academia. So because that would be a important tool to assess the value of their products. So this is one. Secondly, we also recognize that a lot of companies outside China are beginning to use the so-called incentives of the local governments because of a lot of bilateral relationship or geopolitical issue over the past few years. We understand that there has been some uncertainty in the Chinese market, but at the same time, we do recognize that the Chinese government is trying to develop more pro-foreign investment policy, and Beijing, Shanghai, Shenzhen, a couple of first-tier cities in China are positioned as pilot cities. So, RWE and other regulatory tools are being used to attract foreign investors. Some local governments are even trying to develop incentives to attract, those innovative products to in China. They are setting up expos or trade shows to invite hospitals within that region or the local governments to check and see these products, hoping to make a deal. So we've seen, in terms of the payment reform, some companies are trying to work with local KOLs or ecosystem partners to present the evidence, and at the same time, they try to seize upon the opportunities of pilot cities in China. I do have to mention that China is now the chair of GHWP, the Global Harmonization Working Party, which is a regulatory umbrella to have like 33 regulatory bodies of that association. So China is the chair of GHWP. The mission of it is to drive regulatory harmonization. That means China also needs to step up its efforts to improve its regulatory environment in order to attract more innovation. APEC Med is the liaison member of GHWP, so we have been observing this progress. Capacity building, regulatory reliance have been on the agenda of NMPA. So by working with them more closely, we also feel that China wants to develop and improve its regulatory environment in China in order to bring out more innovation to China. And that is what our members have been following up very closely.
Thank you so much, Alicia. That was a very in-depth answer right there. Great to have you on this panel. Frank, can we come back to you just to talk about partners for a second? Your slides were very good in talking about some of the contractual language that you should use to make sure you can get out of any agreement with a partner. And for those companies who maybe cannot think about entering on their own, but need to go down the partner route, whether it's a distribution partner or some other partnership, how can they begin down the due diligence route, making sure that their partner is capable, has got integrity in the market? Are there certain things that a company can do to improve their view?
Sure. Thank you, Tim, for your questions, and pleasure to be on this panel. Yeah, I think there are many information that is publicly available to foreign companies when they're doing due diligence. I think China basically has a platform that publicize corporate information of companies registered in China, including its shareholder information, its like shareholding change history, its directors and officers, registered capital amount, paid-in capital amount, things like that. And also it publishes records of these companies in terms of administrative penalties. So if the company used to be penalized by the government authorities in China, it will be seen as on the platform. So I think these are good information for the start. But of course, the certain information are like trade secrets that are not available publicly. For example, the financial information of the company. I think it's important actually for in some transactions to know the financial position of your partner. So this will usually done through like direct requests from your partners to ask them to provide their financial data and to ensure that they have sufficient financial capabilities to fulfill their obligations in the collaboration contracts. Yeah, and also I think you can also do like online searches regarding the reputation of this company, and also check the information from your contacts in China, like from Junko or other advisors, just to know whether this company is a reputable company and what kind of transactions it has been dealing with. So I think these are all the due diligence that you can make. And of course, contractual protections are also important, but due diligence, I think, is the first step.
Thanks very much, Frank. Bob or Skip, would you like to ask the panel a question?
I'm conscious both of the time of the panelists and also of the participants. What I would suggest at the moment is that our panelists, if they're willing and able to provide further information or are willing to be contacted by participants with questions, perhaps they could put a link into the chat, and we can let the participants follow up on that basis. But I really am very grateful to all the participants, the panelists in the program today. I thought it was very useful, and it has both answered a number of questions, but I'm sure will generate many more. So thank you very much.